Welcome to the Pursuing Freedom Outdoors podcast, a place where backcountry warriors can share their stories of grit, service, healing, and wilderness adventures. I'm your host, Tom Walton, Marine Corps veteran, full-time cop, and aspiring hunting and fishing guide. Join me and others as we journey from the hood to the woods in pursuit of freedom in the outdoors. All right. Welcome to the Pursuing Freedom Outdoors podcast, everybody. I'm your host, Tom Walton. This is episode 19. You guys will hear a discrepancy later on the next episode. I titled them both 19, but next week that'll be 20. This is 19, so we're about to hit the first little milestone here for the podcast. Going into the year, we'll be at 21 episodes, so pretty excited about that. Thanks to everybody for support. Today, I'm joined by somebody that I've been really excited to get on the show, Corey Koff of the Sweetwater Guide School. Corey started in the industry, that being guiding fishing and whitewater rafting. He started in the industry as a whitewater rafting guide in Tennessee, which Corey has advised me was a lot of fun, but mostly he used it as a gig to get him to some new fishing places. After 10 years or so, he enrolled in the Sweetwater Guide School, which led him to an opportunity to guide in Bristol Bay, Alaska, which he did for quite a while before relocating to Oregon, where he guided fall, winter, and spring for steelhead. Along the way, Corey found himself guiding in Chile, and he started instructing at the guide schools in Montana. In early 2021, the job for the director of the guide school came open, and Corey jumped at the chance to take it. He is based near Portland, Oregon, where he lives with his wife, 2 kids, and dog Bowie. And a side note, Corey didn't send this next part to me, but a side note on Corey is, and we'll get more on this in the podcast, but Corey's a passionate fella when it comes to the guide school, but also helping veterans get into the guide school, which is a big reason to have him on the show. He worked exceptionally hard to get me into the guide school, and I know that you, Corey, I know you do that for every veteran student that contacts you. The amount of behind-the-scenes work that you do to get us into the school and get the VA and the voc rehab to cover the cost, getting guys gear is just incredible. Man, to the point when I saw what you were doing at our exit interview, I mean, it was hard not to, get a little bit choked up, man. It was a really cool thing what you guys are doing over there. So thank you very much and welcome to the show. I appreciate you taking the time to join me tonight.
Thanks for having me, Tom, and I appreciate what you just said. It's something that allows me to feel like I'm giving back a little bit more to hopefully ease the process of getting veterans like yourself to the guide school. And once you're there, you got a taste of it. It's a pretty awesome program.
Yeah, it's epic, and I'm excited for us to get to dive into that. And yeah, you made it incredibly easy because I really just had to call you, get a couple pieces of info, and you had it done. So that was pretty awesome. And we'll get into the process a little bit. But before we get to that, I just kind of want to take a deeper dive into your background a little bit. Just kind of starting out from maybe when you were a kid, like when was it that you developed a passion for fishing, and kind of how did you get to a point where you realized that guiding was going to be a career path?
It took a while, but yeah, I grew up in Columbus, Ohio, central Ohio, not really, considered like the trout mecca of the eastern United States or even close to that. There's some really cool fisheries there, but I think it was my dad. I know it was my dad, but he wasn't really like that into fishing, but his thing was water. Wherever we went, if he could get out on a boat for a day, or he had a little sailboat for a while. He grew up on the coast of New York, and he just always had this passion to be on, near, and around the water. I caught that early on, and I used to get in trouble for missing school, but I wasn't like doing anything bad. I was like trying to catch crawdads in a little drainage ditch by the house, or going fishing for bluegill and stuff like that. That's really where it came from. I moved down. I went to college, and I wasn't a good college student in between high school and college, and then ended up dropping out and took a job as a whitewater rafting guide. And like Southeast Tennessee is an amazing part of the country. The county I lived in, mountain biking and fly fishing and going rafting and all kinds of cool stuff. And just having it all be, that kind of mountain living when I was young, city, even though we were in the suburbs. And yeah, I took, I was a raft guide, and then I was working my way up, in the company and assistant manager. And I realized I love this. just from the outdoor aspect, but it wasn't the avenue in the outdoors that I loved. I really was, my buddies were going whitewater kayaking on these like crazy rivers on their free time, and I was going fly fishing. And so I took it seriously, and I tried to learn my home river, and ended up one year just barely raft guiding so I could be available to guide fly fishing trips as often as possible. And I think maybe I got 10 of them, but I was hooked. It was what I wanted to do. And I'd always sat there back then. This was '07, I think, '06 or '07. I'd always looked in the back of Fly Fisherman magazine, and we had a print ad, we weren't online. It said, 1-800-GO-GUIDE, land your dream job. And I called Ron Meek, who's the original director of the guide school, and came to the Bighorn in Montana that spring. Had an amazing time. I still keep up with a few of the guys, almost 20 years later, that were in my class. And they offered me a job to go guide at one of Sweetwater's lodges in Alaska. And that was it. Sounds simple, process, but the hurdles were always like, how can you maintain this and do it as kind of a year-round thing? And I worked a lot of jobs totally unrelated to being a fishing guide in the off season. It's really 100% move based on the fall, winter, spring fisheries, which you talked about in the intro. So it's kind of how I got here.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
I mean, I think that's not quite simple is definitely an understatement, man. Like obviously and I know you have gotten to, I know you a little bit. I've gotten to see the work ethic and passion you have for guiding, for the guide school, but just for the craft. There's just something special for anybody that's doing something that they love, that they're passionate about. But when, a professional is truly dedicated to learning their craft and being an expert in it, and they love it, whether it's a fly fisherman or even, some of my buddies that are really good at custom carpentry, man, they love it. That's their craft. And I appreciate that passion. And it obviously took you a lot of time to get where you're at now and to get to where you were guiding full time. So I think, you kind of answered my question. I was going to ask you about how did you find the Sweetwater Guide School and what it did for you. But like my next.
For me, it was huge. It was, like I came in with a pretty good, river knowledge, having been a raft, but I wasn't rowing then. It was more, I'd done a decent amount of, but reading water. Mm-hmm. Like I also came in, kind of knowing how a lodge worked to a point, and how you got to be strong and fresh and positive for an entire season,
right.
know. But what I learned about just like, it's a totally different dynamic, like two guests, one guide, how do you really get a sense of what they are wanting out of the day, and how do you try to honor that? This is the guide school stuff we talked about when you were there.
Mm-hmm.
Also, like I've been in this position. I've moved around a lot. I've been a first-year guide at a lot of different places. So I've been able to go back to guide school, as a first-year guide all of a sudden in Oregon, trying to figure out, steelhead and spey casting, going back to what I learned at guide school and trying to apply it there. So, and then the turnaround is so cool. The fact that I can come back, and I won't say I can say that I never got burned out on guiding. There's definitely times where you're beat down, it's a long season. You figure out ways to pep yourself back up. Part of that was I worked amazing crews of people that was very family oriented, and we all helped each other out with that. But the guide school was always, from day one when I was guiding at it for, a couple weeks a year till now where I'm there 14 weeks a year, it was just extra motivating to be able to like pass along what I've learned. And that's what the Vermillion brothers that own Sweetwater, what they told me when I started this job is like, this is all the stuff that we wished we'd learned in a classroom setting instead of just by kind of trial by fire, when you go out there
right.
and be a guide.
So I guess that kind of leads me to like, what's a little bit of the history on the guide school? The
guide school was founded in the late 90s. I think it was 97 or 98, a few years after Sweetwater was founded. I just referenced them, but Dan, Jeff, and Pat Vermillion are the three brothers that own the company. They guided forever all over the place, Alaska and Russia and Montana, with a guy named Ron Meek, who would become the first director of the guide school, but also was kind of their right-hand man when they were getting their operations in Mongolia and other places set up. And I just touched on it. They wanted to train people kind of the right way to go out there and be a guide, and trying to keep the training process simple. And I think you could speak to that as well. Like, it's a ton of information over the course of the week, but it really does fall into a few categories of what you need to get dialed in to go out there and be a successful guide, or just a successful and passionate and conservation minded angler for the rest of your career. So yeah, they started the guide school. They ran a week. It was up in Alaska one week, and hard to get to, so but everybody had a blast. And they brought it down to the Yellowstone and the Bighorn, where we've been running it ever since. And we run 14 weeks of the school a year. Sweetwater has some amazing lodges. We don't need to fill every spot, obviously, at the lodges. They're maintaining their guides. So, it's a testament to the job market out there, and also the veteran network out there, that we can do this and be successful. And I think the biggest thing that we try to get across is, like, I know I'm not going to work side by side with many of the students that come to the class, but I'll probably see them on the Bighorn and the Yellowstone or other rivers that I've been on. And we're trying to put people out there that are going to operate just in the right way across all facets of it, whether it's the conservation minded ethic or just being nice, and I hope we got that across when you were at the class of, like, it's just going fishing, it's very fun job. There's a lot of pressure at times. It's expensive to go in a guide boat, but it's just getting people out and going fishing. And then you add in the whole veteran network and the fact train a lot of those students who might not necessarily be going to look to do guiding as a second career. A lot of them are, but equally as important, that are going to volunteer their time, and maybe not even with an organization, but just simply like, I want to go take another vet out fishing that I met at an event or something. So
Right.
I went a little beyond the history of the program, but that's kind of the gist of it and what we're trying to be all about at the guide school.
Yeah, I appreciate it, because it just brings, it's the full picture from, beginning to where you're at now, and there's a couple of things to touch on that stood out to me is, one, your passion for training, fishing guides, whether you fish with them or not, that you would want to fish with, that you would want to work with, have on the river by you, even if they're not working for or with you, that they're out there doing the right things, representing the industry well, taking care of, the conservation aspect and respecting the fisheries, the fish. It's a stretch because it's completely different occupations, but I can relate to that in the sense of my background in training cops. I was a field training officer, which is, you're like the first guy when somebody gets out of the academy, the first thing they do is go into a field training program with a field training officer, and you are, you start by holding their hand as they go through the process of learning how to be a street cop and do the on the job training part of it. And for me, it's my biggest motivation was, I am training somebody that's going to potentially save my life, or save my family's life, save my buddy's life, let alone anybody else in the community, right? I'm training somebody that I might be working with for the next 20, 30 years. And so that always helped. That mentality is one of the reasons I always took it seriously. And the impact that my instructors had on me, I wanted to have that impact on my students. And I will tell you, just from my experience doing that, I can, just the last couple of nights, I actually been working till midnight the last 2 nights, because I've been teaching at our in-house SWAT academy that we've been doing with some of our new SWAT guys. And I'm doing some of the instructing, but the guys that are really running the show for this class, this go around with these batch of new guys, they're guys that I was either their field training officer, or I, has some sort of instructional or leadership role, mentored them on not just their new law enforcement career, but when they came on the SWAT team too later. So it's really cool to have somebody that I started with day one when they first got out of the academy to now. I mean, they're teaching me how to do the job.
Yeah.
So,
well, and that I would never compare the two, you know what I'm getting at, but the being always willing to learn, whether it's somebody that's younger than you that you've trained, or, we all learn and interpret things differently. I'm guessing it relates to what you're talking about too, that like it probably comes across the table in some way, but it's something we talk about at guide school. Like you're always under the microscope. You're always being watched. Again, not comparing law enforcement to being a fly fishing guide, but
Right. No worries.
it's great until you do one thing that maybe you messed up on, which you could take back, and it feels like there's 10 sets of eyes on you. Worse consequences, obviously, than what could happen in a boat. But yeah, I can definitely relate to that. You saw it from the other guys that were the instructors at the class. I know a lot of amazing fishing guides, and a lot of them probably would be great guide school instructors, but some of them, you got to have that extra passion to want to teach people.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And so that's why we do it, and it's awesome. I mean, there's a reason I get a lot of emails and phone calls about guides after a few years wanting to come back and be instructors at the guide school, because a lot of them want to pay it forward,
Absolutely. When something or someone has a huge impact on you, I think it's common for folks that, especially good, hardworking people, to want to go and do the same thing for other people.
Right.
But yeah, I mean, you guys, all the instructors were fantastic. Different personalities. You guys worked well together as instructors, like individually out on the boats. It was just always fun, and learning different things and different styles. And you picked up different tidbits. And that's actually the same thing, just continuing to compare the field training program. You usually have 3 to 4 field training officers before you're done and out on your own as a solo police officer. And so we always tell folks, hey, you're going to get different stuff, like little different aspects from every FTO. You're going to take what you like, and that's what you're going to apply, and how the kind of, police officer you're at least going to start out as. So I know, just coming back home after guide school, going out to the river and doing some of the volunteer guiding with Protector's Peak that I've kind of filled you in on.
Yeah.
I mean, instantly I'm picking up things. I did and said things from every single instructor at guide school there that I picked up on. Said, man, that's great. I'm going to use it, from everybody out on the river.
The best part about it. Yeah, I love to hear that. And we're still, we come back every night and rehash our day. And, obviously it's part of doing a good job is like, okay, what was this person needing to work on? And what was this person's, progression with rowing, whatever the case may be. But we're also constantly like, oh man, that was a great way. I heard you describe this in a certain way, and trying to feed and learn off of each other. And that's the job, whether you're taking a buddy out, whether you're working with a veterans nonprofit group, guiding full time, is just how do you get the same point across to consistently different personalities and people that are going to learn and in different ways. And also a lot of your guests are not out there to learn anything. They're out there to have a good time and go fishing, you know?
They want to reel in a big fish.
Exactly. Which is awesome. We get to do that for work sometime. Yeah. And the class is also just a week, hopefully we recognize that. We've seen people that occasionally a student maybe puts too much pressure on themselves to get to a certain point with something. And we take a step back on that Saturday morning exit interview and was like, it was just a week, like, look where you started on Monday and look where you were on Friday. And if you can go, and we planted some seeds for how to go and do all this stuff when you get home, then it's on them to continue to, foster that learning and see where it takes them.
Yeah, absolutely. And I could think of, man, you guys definitely did it. And I have no idea what your guys' conversations were like, but I could feel it too. Because I kind of made it, I told everyone, like, hey, I've never caught anything on a streamer. I'd really like to understand streamer fishing. And man, you had me out there all day. I'm chucking that streamer across the river and just getting my butt kicked, man. But there was like, one, your instruction was great. And two, I got to that end of that day, and this was kind of one of those highlight moments. And I'm just, not to make the podcast about me, but just a moment that I really enjoyed kind of sharing with you, because you would put so much effort into teaching me, was when it finally happened, right? I mean, we're sitting there, the last stop of the day. And to me, that's one of the best parts about a fishing trip, is almost when you have a rough day and that last fish gets caught at the last minute. But,
Yeah.
I'm sitting there. I just remember you're down the river and you're like, you kind of nailed a couple of them. You're like, I'm really sorry, Tom. Like, just keep trying. And I just stopped, man. I stopped and, you'd been telling me what to do and kind of helping me along the way, but I stopped and I just watched you cast like 2 or 3 times. And I tried to cement what your movements from how far you casted, which direction you were casting into the current, when you started actually doing the strips to the timing of your stripping. And I just like, all right, I'm going to imitate 100% what he's doing. And as soon as I did that, I got that bump, did it again, and then had that brown on. And
That's
that
awesome, man.
was, man, that was,
I
yeah.
do remember that. That was a pretty high stoke factor, especially late in the day. And,
Yeah.
I'll flip it on you. I mean, what you did was you guided. You don't realize it, but I'm sure we talked about this at the class, but put the rod down and you're going to learn so much. You lose that tunnel vision, maybe recognize, I don't know if it was the case that session, but you recognize you weren't letting your flies get down or something like that. Sometimes it matters, and
Yep.
People think we walk into those spots, and as many times as I've fished those runs on the bighorn and think, oh, I know exactly where the fish is. And this is when we're guiding, and I know exactly how to get it. And that's not the case all the time. Like, you got to experiment. Well, when I'm guiding, I can't grab the rod and find them and then be like, here you go, So just walking around and looking and seeing what's going on and moving your people around to try to get them into that zone where the fish are and making sure that you feel really good that you covered it when you get to the end of it, even if you got them or not. You learn, that's it. You learn a ton, and just by watching. And another perk as an instructor at the guide school is we do get to go fishing a bit.
Right.
Don't get to do that in too many other guiding scenarios that I've been in.
Right.
But yeah, it's awesome. I love your takeaways from the class. And as much as you've told me so far about like what you learned at the school, I just think it's so cool that you're like stayed in touch with, the whole group at this point, and, I still stay in touch with a couple of the guys that I went to guide school with, and in a small world role, met back up with one of them, a few years ago. But yeah, that's it for me is really, we love being on the water. We love fishing. I get to know people a little bit coming into the class. You fill out an application. Some of the people I've talked to a lot, some of them not that much, but it always just works out. You saw one of our 14 weeks a year, and that was a really special group, but just like the different demographic, the different ages, the different military versus non-military backgrounds, and everybody getting them together and just having this fun, learning experience is what's really cool about it. And that's also, I guess I'm getting into the older guy realm. There's a long time ago where it was, try to catch as many fish as you can, and then as many big fish as you can. And then, you know what I'm getting at. But now just really, really those connections, and the fact that if you haven't yet, you will bump into a former guide school student elsewhere. The numbers just say it'll happen, and I love hearing about that down the road.
Yep. Yeah. Between us keeping in touch. And then, like I told you, I'm actually mid recording with Jesse because of our interruptions, but that's just been cool.
Yeah.
And we actually met a couple of years ago when I was in Alaska on a hunting trip. I met him because I went into the Sportsman's Warehouse there in Fairbanks to just find somebody to talk to about maybe getting a local fly fishing guide, because I never fished in Alaska and wanted to do it because I got there a little bit early for my trip so that I have a couple of days to do something like that. Got to talk and realized we were both veterans, exchanged numbers. He actually invited me to fish with him after my hunt. It just didn't work out because it's a long story about breaking down on the Hall Road and up above the Arctic Circle and delayed return and then having to cut up caribou. But we stayed in touch, and it's been fun to watch him start his guide business up there. But what it was pretty wild, I was like, I just went to this guide school, and not thinking that this guy in Alaska would have, and not that, I mean, I know you guys have students and business in Alaska, but for whatever reason, it hadn't dawned on me it'd be a possibility. And he asked, well, what guide school? And I told him, he's like, oh yeah, man, I remember that. And he immediately started talking about the help that you gave him getting into the school and how much he enjoyed your instruction and stuff up there. So he was excited when I told him we were going to have the podcast tonight.
Yeah. Cool. I can't wait to hear his podcast next and how he's doing up there.
He's doing good. Yeah.
Yeah.
And some of the other things you touched on too, that I think one of the reasons I keep coming back to, whether it's guiding hunting, guiding fishing, just guiding, being with folks in the outdoors, whether it's paid or volunteer. And just like you, enjoy the connection with people. One of my favorite parts of
Yeah.
guide school was coming up there and meeting the fellow students, meeting the instructors. And I like being with people outdoors. And especially if I can share a passion with them, it's even better.
Right. Yeah. We're on the same page, and it's what we're doing. And then I love those stories, hearing where people end up. I'm rarely surprised, just because I guess the people that come to our class are putting that extra, the ones that are looking to go guide, and it's something we can talk about, because there's some people there, and it was at your class too, that are looking at this as a way to hone their skill set and, become a better angler and a more successful angler, and have a good, but yeah, it's an awesome dynamic, from that standpoint. I was saying I'm never surprised when people end up, like, I guess I got off track there, when I get these calls at the end of the season about just like how great their season was, or even better, the lodge manager emails me and says, what a great job they did. And that can be anywhere from, a kid that went up and was a lodge hand and a guide in training, or a fly shop worker, or somebody that went right into full-time guiding after the school.
Yeah, that's awesome. And what better feedback as an instructor than when that person that employed that guy calls you back?
Yeah.
That's pretty
Yeah, for sure.
validating. Yeah, that's
Yeah.
cool. And we'll definitely dive into a little bit too on the veterans thing, but I think it's just cool that you brought up, and I'll reiterate, even if you're a veteran, you're listening and you have some GI Bill benefits left, maybe after you got your degree or whatever, which was my case. And then there's also some qualifications where you can get some vocational rehabilitation benefits. And that program, I think, is now a VNRE, but
Yeah.
it's worth going to the school, because even if you don't want to necessarily get into guiding, I guarantee you, after you spend a week with Corey and his crew, you're going to be a better angler, because I know I am. And I could tell you a couple of different stories about just in the few weeks following the school that, I came back, it was September. Hunting was becoming a focus on my mind, but took some folks out for Protector's Peak. I went fishing on my own. And the difference in being able to read the water, decide what I'm going to throw, what kind of rig I'm going to do, and make decisions based on what I'm intaking way more efficiently and effectively. When I might have struggled, never caught a fish before, trying the same thing over and over again, I was like, oh, that didn't work, but I bet you this will. Okay, I'm doing a nymphing rig. And, now I understand what the importance of depth and current speed, and how, all those things that you hammered in on us.
Well, am I right? Sorry to interrupt, but am I right that you made all those changes because you were keeping it simple? You're more confident in your knots.
Yep. That's a huge, huge aspect.
Which is a huge focus at the class. If you, this won't happen, but if you end the week and the only thing you improved on was your knots, you're still in a better place than you were, starting off. And we do try to keep it simple, but I love hearing that too, because sometimes, people ask me, like, is this class going to translate off of the Bighorn River?
Absolutely.
Or outside of a Montana tailwater? And I can attest to that from going to the class and then going up to Alaska. There's times where it's similar fishing, but overall it was different. It definitely translates, even if you're going to somewhere that's, more of a walk and wade fishery. Well, we walk and wade the Bighorn, when we pull those boats over, and and treat it like a small river, and try to analyze the bugs and what's going on and why the fish are going to be where they're at.
Yeah, that's, true. Just immediately proceeding on my way home. And then when I got home, I fished, a number of different rivers. I stopped at the Yellowstone, the Clark Fork, the North Fork of the Coeur d'Alene here in my home waters. I've been up to a river called the Moya River, which is a real kind of small water fishery. And then the St. Joe River, where we have Protector's Peak, and everything, all the things I learned at guide school, 100% were translatable to all of those rivers. So no doubt about that.
That's awesome to hear. Yeah.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Oh, I was gonna say, so that I think that's huge, man. If you want to be a better angler, even if you're not interested in guiding, go to the school. Just be careful because you might go to the school and end up wanting to guide afterwards. Because it
Yeah,
definitely, you guys make it so much fun that you just want to keep being a part of that type of thing.
appreciate that.
So I kind of just want to
Yeah,
jump back. Go ahead.
oh, I was just going to say, I mean, on that note, we do get a good number of people. The cost of the class for 2026 is $3,700. That includes all your lodging and food for the week. So I totally understand it's not a small amount of money, but when you factor that side of it in and the how the lodging's pretty darn nice in our opinion, it's a good value. I mean, there was a couple, Sue and Dan,
Mm-hmm.
were there a week you were there, right? And they no interest in guiding, but they're kind of in retirement, wanting to go fish hard. They kept telling me, they said they worked too hard their whole life, and now they want to make up for it and go fishing a bunch of places. And I can't remember the list, but they were going all over the place just this past fall and spring. So yeah, that's not uncommon. As far as the GI Bill, if it's a good time to talk about it,
Yeah, go ahead. Let's roll into it.
the class accounts for just under 2 months of your GI Bill benefits, and that's the Chapter 33, like post 9/11 GI Bill, which I think was what you used. And as I remember, you used up your last bit of benefits, but because that's another important point, because you had over half of the amount that they paid. Am I right that was the case?
Yeah,
Tom?
you're 100%. You're spot on. Yeah.
Yeah. Because you had over half, they paid for the class in full. Even if you had like 15 days, that's going to prorate, to a certain percentage. It's like 33% off of the class, which isn't nothing. And one of the biggest myths I try to dispel, I guess there's two of them when we're talking about a lot of veterans interested in coming to the class, is one, the process is not difficult. We've done a good job. I feel good saying that, of making it pretty streamlined. There's always hiccups and things that happen, but I'm a huge fan of the VA and the Montana supervisory officials that I have. And we have these, every year, twice a year meetings with other people in my position. And they're just always adamant of saying, like, this whole side of things, we can't let it be a barrier on attendance, And so anyway, I just like to, we put a lot of that work on ourselves to do the enrollment. When to get enrolled, you have to fill out a link that we provide, and then provide your COE, or your statement of benefits. That just shows how much GI Bill you have left. And then for record keeping, they ask us to have some documents on file. It's like transcripts if you ever used your GI Bill before, and military training records, like your joint services transcripts, or for the Air Force, it's like a CCAF. So that's really it. And then we get you enrolled, and if the GI Bill benefits are there and you have enough eligibility percentage, you're good to go. Yeah, I've had people waiver. You might know more of this, being a veteran yourself, if people run into barriers to do stuff like this, but we've really tried to streamline it.
And that's what I think, I can't reiterate enough, is that how much you guys do on the back end, because it's not a simple task to learn how to work with the VA. And I'm sure there was a lot of work just getting to the point where the school could accept the GI Bill and accept veteran students through that, and the VOC rehab program and stuff like that. I mean, that's
was
a lot of
before
work.
my time. Yeah, right. I can't take any credit for that. I have to do I just did it today, a yearly reapproval process. And there's a lot of paperwork that goes into it. But, to me, it's like working at a fishing lodge in Alaska. There were parts of the job that weren't my favorite. Like, we had to clean the rooms, and help out in the kitchen and things like that. And it wasn't, initially what you picture as being a fishing guide, but it's what allows you to do the job that you really enjoy doing. And I don't mean anything dealing with the VA. I just mean being in the office.
Yep. Yeah.
I'd rather be 100%. On the water. Yeah, but this job, all that stuff allows me to go be in Montana for 14 weeks a year, working. I guess it's hard to call it work, but working at these guide schools,
Absolutely.
Yeah. and it's, it's constantly learning. And like I said, they're very helpful in helping me figure
Good.
these things out. The other one you reference is that it's VR&E. I think it used to be called vocational rehab and employment. Now it's veteran readiness. I get a bit confused, but VR&E. And that's a program that I think you were looking into to potentially come back and do our advanced class in the fall, correct? That's a program where you get appointed a counselor, and then the counselor and you work together on, saying, okay, this is a good fit generally for another career path. However, I've had people reach out and look into it, and it was another career path, but the career path was like volunteering their time or working for a nonprofit group. So I don't think 100% it means like you have to have a job lined up and you're going to be on the water X number of days right away, because it's like we're a trade school. You could use that VR&E benefits to go to lineman school, or I know some people have used, to do a full 4-year college degree on VR&E and then use their GI Bill for other stuff. And that process isn't, it's pretty much the same. It's a different enrollment process on my end, but it doesn't really change what you need to provide me. I mean, you personally, like for this next class,
Right.
to attend.
Yeah, no, it's great. And like I said, the fact that you guys, well, you right now being the job, and then Sweetwater as a company has gone so far to do this stuff, provide this service, and you make it so easy, because the barriers are a big thing with people in general, right? When there's barriers, sometimes we meet resistance in people, just human nature, like, you know what, maybe I'll do that later,
Yeah.
or now is not a good time. For the using the GI Bill, right? I mean, I got paid, and this isn't a brag, but this is information for other veterans that are thinking about this, especially if you haven't used your GI Bill and are familiar with how it works. I got paid to go to this fly fishing guide school. And not only did it get covered, but then I got my basic housing and allowance checks following up on that, and ended up with money in the bank. So when I came home from this, I'm the most of my gas and any food expense I did have, which wasn't much because it was only when I was traveling, because you guys provided the food, and I spent one night in a hotel on my way home, and that was only just my own choice. I didn't lose any. I didn't spend any money. This was just. I mean, I got an awesome vacation, right? So
Unfortunately, that's not like 100% as
no,
far as the amount, but I do know of that happening a good amount. And
yeah,
also VR&E program, and this is where it's life. Like it comes down to a counselor's decision on your attendance, but also we have had more than a couple students get some of their gear and equipment paid for, which to me, it just makes sense. But I get both sides of it. Like if you were going to electrician school, I would think they would provide some money for the tools you need to leave that program and go be an electrician, just to use that as an example.
yeah,
But yeah, the process is set up. I think probably the biggest thing I recognize is pretty simple. A lot of people just don't know there's all this we're what's called a non-college degree program with the VA, but I call them non-traditional schooling opportunities to use your GI Bill benefits. And I hope more and more of that happens. But yeah, I was just touching on, I guess, myths. And one of the myths is the process is hard. The other one is not a myth, but people just don't know that you can do these things. I think that's what we were chatting about, and a lot of people, and no criticism, I get it, but, post, retirement from the military, it's a lot of like, oh, you can go to this kind of training or this kind of training or this kind of training. And particularly in a lot of different states, it's, being a fly fishing guide isn't as on the radar in some states as it might be in, Montana or Alaska or Oregon or Idaho, and now a lot of like, the southeastern states and Texas. I'm not meaning to leave anybody out, but you know what I mean? There's, it's kind of a non-traditional career path. The biggest, I think, myth or thing that students seem worried about, whether you're a vet or not, is you don't need a certain skill set to attend the class. And we're always going to honor the fact that we are a guide school and we're training people to go out there and be fishing guides. But we've had people that have hardly ever touched a fly rod before. Very commonly, they haven't, you name it. And I don't want this to sound like a sales pitch, but sometimes we'd rather get you early on than have bad habits developed, And I can think of multiple people that came to the school with a very beginner skill set, graduated the school, and went on to guide very soon after. And it tells you what it's really about. And it's about your ability to take care of people, be safe is number one, take care of them, show them a good time, and learn your river or bodies of water that you're going to be guiding on. That person probably wasn't guiding in a place where you had, 50 different sections of a river to learn to row and navigate and figure out, but they can go on and have a very successful guiding career after that. And equally as important, if you leave the class with a few of these simple things, I'm not saying they're easy, but I'm saying it's not that many categories of what we're actually talking about there. But if you leave the class with a good grasp of those things, and you said it earlier, you're going to be a better angler very quickly. And it is your knots, and it is the casting class, and it is the fact that not that many people have spent 5 days and 6.5 in fish camp, just living and breathing and talking about this and doing nothing but thinking about that the whole time. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah. It's a unique environment, and it is such a great way to put it, man. When you're there, you're eat, sleeping, breathing, fly
Yeah.
fishing and guiding from the minute you wake up to the minute you go to bed. Cause if you're not with the instructors, you're studying, you're tying knots, you're with your fellow
Yeah, your time
students.
flies and
Yep.
time
Time
knots and
flies.
yeah, yeah. So yeah, you know, there's a lot to talk about, but that covers it, it really does. And I'm just basing all this stuff off of I don't how many conversations I've had over the last, 6 years now, and all the times that I was an instructor at the guide school about why people are there and what they're worried about coming in. And those exit interviews where one is we want to know how we're doing. We're always trying to improve, but also in a positive way, telling people, here's what you want to go home and work on. And it will change the game for you.
Absolutely.
And the fact that, help me out, is myself and Callan, was Pat Joyce there the week you were there? I
Not
meant to
Pat.
look that up.
Now I'm
Matt
getting
Davey? No,
now
he
I'm getting
wasn't.
bad names.
Oh,
He had his birthday while we were there. Ryan,
Brad.
Brad,
Yeah,
Callan and Brad. Yep. Sorry, Brad.
Brad. I just saw Brad a few days ago. We went on a fishing trip. Alan's a former guide school student. That's all I was getting at. Brad was one of my instructors at the guide school. We started somewhere, and we're also still trying to learn and use these tools to go learn different fisheries and keep putting it into action, And you saw two of the guides that do most of the classes, but there's 5 or 6 more. And I guarantee you, if you were there at a class with them, you'd have an amazing time as well. I have no problem saying that.
No doubt, about that. One of the things that I noticed you've said a couple times, and I think it's important, is with anything that you pick as a profession and a craft, is just being that consummate student. I mean, I love the humility of all of you guys at the school, all being the instructors. Is I never felt like you guys ever looked down on a student or thought, "Look at me, I'm on top of the world because I'm a guide instructor." I mean, you guys, not only did you carry yourselves humbly, but it's very obvious. I mean, just by the way you're talking during this podcast interview and some of the conversations I had with all of you guys when we were there, is you're always learning. Just like you said, you're always trying to learn, and that helps you grow. It helps you be better professionally, but it helps you be a far better instructor too.
I appreciate that. And that's what it's all about. I didn't always honor that my whole life, but we're always working towards something and trying to keep learning. And I can only speak for myself, moving around a lot. I never got to guide where I grew up. It's to Tennessee, and I was a first-year guide, and then twice, because I did it for fishing and whitewater rafting. And then I got to go down to South America, came back and started guiding at the classes on the Bighorn. Well, I hadn't been on the Bighorn in quite a few years. You know what I mean? I was a first-year guide again. And then I moved to Oregon, and I was a first-year guide. And in Alaska, I was a first-year guide. I buy into what the class.
That's fantastic.
And I also, You don't have to go to guide school to become a guide. And this is, not talking about the quite a few people we come that are looking to just hone their skills and maybe guide. A lot of times it's I want to test the waters and maybe guide down the road. And we try to give a snapshot of what guide life looks like a little bit, and I get a lot of feedback after the fact that people wish they had. And some of the longtime guides that have come back and worked at our guide school and we're like, man, I think my first couple seasons would have been, it's always pressure, but a little less pressure, if I had some of this info under my belt, and, we have a pretty tight curriculum at the school, even though we try to make it very adaptable to each student and where they are and what their skill set is, meaning safety first. We're never going to, have you row if the rowing's too rough, whatever the case may be. But I think the people that really get the most out of the class, whether they're going on to guide or just on their fishing journey, just ask questions, all morning at the meetings, all day on the river. You get this, you've hired a guide who's there to answer those questions, and hear about their story and hear what they, ask us what we struggled with early on. It just in our own personal fishing. And I'm pretty sure we're all pretty open about that. And that's also what tells us that somebody's really trying to foster that continuing quest for knowledge.
Absolutely. Well, man, I think we've done a great job covering the school, and I hope people get a gist not just what it's about, but what it's like when you get there. Yeah, I know for me it was, it sounds maybe cliche to be like an experience of a lifetime. In the sense that I do hope to come back for the advanced school at some point, whether it's next year or the year after, on Voc rehab on my own dime. I hope to come back. So hopefully it's not a once in a lifetime thing. But that being said, I mean, personally, the impact it had on me with my fishing abilities, right? I definitely left a better angler, more confident that, I could go get a job being a fishing guide. Like I've talked to you before I started recording, part of the reason I do the podcast is, one, I get to have really awesome conversations with people and I enjoy meeting and having these connections. But two, I really want to inspire folks to understand that you're not stuck where you're at right now if you're not enjoying what you're doing. And I think I say this every episode because we talk about it so much. So Sheriff, if you're listening to the podcast, I love my job. Please let me come to work on Monday. Not trying to quit working for you tomorrow. But, cops have to have backup plans. And, and for me, whether I'm guiding, volunteering, or guiding for money or for pay, getting hired, it's for all the reasons I already said. I enjoy the meeting the people and stuff like that. But it's just, for me, it is like, I like that it gives me confidence. And the school only made that extremely higher, is the confidence that I can go out. I'm not stuck. I'm not just a cop. If something happened to me tomorrow, maybe an injury or something job related injury, and I couldn't go back to my career that I've been doing for, 14 years almost, that I have stuff I can go do. Right. And you guys help me prove to myself that I could go out there and be a fishing guide. Right. And the whole thing too, like you talked about testing the waters. That was another thing I was kind of doing with the school, is testing the waters. And absolutely, man, for me, it was like, yeah, this is something that whether it's I do it full time when I retire from law enforcement or just keep doing it on the side here locally while I am in law enforcement. Yeah, I want to do this. I love being on the river with people and I want to keep doing it. And that's a lot of because of the experience that I had at the school.
Appreciate that. And a lot of that is your personality and desire to learn that you brought. We just like to think we have a good environment that fosters that,
Absolutely.
And whatever your age, background, and end goal is, I appreciate that. And I think it's really cool what you're doing, just to it's very much like the guide school, just to support, even I don't want to compare us to that extent, but just to support other veterans and first responders that are out there with opportunities and positive vibes about the cool stuff that you could go do outside. For me, I made a bad financial decision a long time ago that I needed to work outside to really be happy. And I figured out a way to do it, and I'm really lucky and fortunate for that. But you touched on it, like planning, even just planning your fishing plans for post retirement and where you want to do, and maybe how you can go do them at a higher level, or maybe it's a job, or maybe it's just a way to pay it forward a little bit. It's a fun community we're in. And, especially a lot of us that have made it into somewhat of a career, I think you find a lot of.
I would think so, because I think, and I was going to touch on this, and we'll knock these last couple ones out real quick. But one of the things I just kind of wanted to get to asking you is, in my travels in life and going and hiring a couple of fishing guides here and there, whether fly fishing or spin fishing, whatever it's been, I feel like you meet two kinds of guides. You meet that really young kid who is, it's kind of like their summer job between college classes, and nothing wrong with that,
Oh, yeah.
or you meet a kid that's like, maybe they want to do it. I have met a couple of, like, the kid that guided my trip in Alaska. It was just a float on the Chena River for grayling. Man, that I would be shocked if that kid wasn't guiding fishing trips right now. He was one of those young, he was 18 years old, but you could just tell his mind was in the right place, and he was there to do it. And I would imagine hopefully still guiding. But like, I guess what I'm saying is there's a washout rate, I just kind of the long way to say that there's probably a washout rate. Not everybody that starts out, whether they want to do it as a career or whether they just want to do it for a few years or a couple seasons, not everyone's going to make it a career for a lot of reasons, because it's financially difficult when you start out, especially if you're already in a family situation, and it takes time away from your family if you're traveling to Alaska like you did. So what is it, I guess that what I'm asking you is, what does it take? I mean, can you describe that kind of your experience with that?
What does it take to not wash out?
Yeah. What does it take? And what have you experienced as far as what I kind of talked about?
No, you're absolutely right, but you also, you said it. It's not an age thing. Like that 18-year-old kid, I'm so like positive by the interactions I have at the guide school with younger people. I hate saying that because I'm getting older, but we've had 16, 17, 18-year-olds at the class, and they're so nice and like hardworking generally. And like, they want to be doing this. So it's a personality, it's a case by case basis. And, I think the most important thing is, you got to start somewhere, but do your best to surround yourself with people that love what they're doing. Also, I do think I don't know, but I would have to guess that washout rate, the later in life you started at this, goes down lower and lower and lower. Finally jumping into something that you've probably always been thinking about doing. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Well, and there's a little bit of maturity. I could tell you, well, some 18-year-olds and even 15-year-olds are out there and they're ready to be outstanding fishing guides. I could tell you 18-year-old Tom Walton would never have made a good fishing guide. I did not have the personality for it. I had a lot of maturing to do that thankfully the Marine Corps and law enforcement has helped out with, but yeah.
Same with me. I totally get it. Also, like, I do talk about this at the guide school. It can be a long season. You got to make sure that on September did in June, when you're so ecstatic about it and fresh. But it's also life. We sit there and we say you're not allowed to be burned out. It's a seasonal job. You can be. You just got to manage it and make sure it's not coming across in the job that you're putting out there.
Absolutely.
That's probably the biggest factor. And I've heard those stories, people fish with somebody and then they blamed it on that factor. But you're also getting one day with a person, Unfortunately, you spent a good chunk of money to spend that one day with them if you had negative experience. But, I'm kind of on the guide side of that. I don't know of these wake up calls where it was just like, oh, I'm not ready. I shouldn't be doing this. I'm going to go do something else. It's more like,
Gotcha.
what do I need to add and get better? And I've also had a few guide school students come to us after they guided a little bit, and they were like, wow, like that I learned a lot about how to do this maybe a little bit differently. That's the biggest thing.
Yeah, yeah. And the last note on the guide thing, I could tell you one of the reasons that I've had a long time interest in guiding in the outdoors. The only guided experience that I've personally been on have been a handful of fishing trips. Nothing, not a lot, but there's like every once in a while in my life, popped up an opportunity, or like when I go to Alaska, I don't have anything with me, I don't know anything about anything. I'm like, man, I want to do this, and so it was really easy to get an outfitter and get a trip and get picked up at the hotel and go fish.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
you know, that was awesome. So I mean, I guess what I'm getting at is one of the reasons I have such a strong interest and have had for years now is because I've had positive experiences with guides. I know how they did a good job portraying, even if I didn't think they were going to do it for a career, they did a good job at portraying what they were doing as fun and exciting, and they made it a good
yeah,
experience. I've never had a bad fishing experience with a guide at all. And I've done a few different things from out on the ocean to
yes.
river fishing, but I've never had a bad experience in watching how much some of these guys. There was one guy in particular, without getting too far into it, he was out on Tahoe. We were there for a family reunion. Family wanted to book a trip. We booked a trip with a guy that guides on the lake in the summer and spring, and then he's up in the mountains guiding big game in the fall.
Well,
Talking to that guy, I left that trip, and he might be one of the major, things that sparked. He might be one of the major sparks where I was like, man, I think I could be really interested in doing that. And it just kind of has grown into a flame
yeah,
to where I've gone out and tried it. So yeah, I've never had a
yeah.
bad
No, I can.
experience with the guide, man. Guides can
Yeah,
really
I can.
impact people.
Yeah, and it's a great way to. It's smart. I mean, if you have the money to do it or can split a boat, it's a great way to learn a fishery. Move to a new town, or you're planning on a trip, hire a guide one day, and then try to go get after it on your own for a couple. I do that. I met Brad, and we were invited by a former student who's a vet to go red fishing out of Biloxi, Mississippi this past week. So we got basically a day and a half due to weather out with a guide, and I was watching this guy the whole time, and like the light conditions weren't very good. You really want to be able to see those fish. I've only done that once before in my life, but I was like, hey, this is the coolest thing I've ever seen. Just so different from what I'm used to. And this guy reminded me that I need to work my tail off right up until last light every day of my guiding career, because the motor on this guy was amazing. Just wanted it more than we did, which is a
Yeah.
very common saying as fishing guides. But yeah, I'm constantly like, checking in on that personally and making sure that whether it's guide school or guiding somebody on a steelhead float out here, that you're honoring their vacation.
Yeah, absolutely. That's huge. Yeah. Well, man, thank you again. I mean, that's the insight in the school, insight into guiding. Last kind of question I had to ask you, just kind of a fun question about you, but you've gotten to guide a lot of places, and I'm just kind of curious. I think I know the answer, but I might be wrong because I still don't know you that well. So we'll see. But what's your favorite place that you've gotten to go guide in?
This would be like another hour podcast for me to answer. Let's set aside the guide school and how much I love that.
All
But
right.
I do love chasing steelhead. I'm lucky that I can do that at home, but I would probably say Alaska. And where I got to work in Alaska it's amazing all over the place. What I really loved was the variety in the fisheries, the size and scale of the water, and then the variety in the fish. And like there were times where it was like a rainbow fishery and we're going to target big rainbows. And I love that. But I equally loved, like hiking this stream, and it's like, oh, there's a char and there's a dolly varden and there's a grayling. And was that just a lake trout that swam by? And like all in these same bodies of water at times. So was that your guess?
That was my guess. I would have guessed Alaska,
Yeah.
just because you spent enough time there to.
Yeah, I spent I think it was almost 13 seasons. I broke it up. That's a long run in one place. Guiding in Patagonia was amazing. Very similar fishing to Montana, but just the whole cultural side of it. Me trying to learn to be a fishing guide. But yeah, this whole thing has taken me to some really cool places. There's also a unnamed little tiny creek in southeast Tennessee that's one of my favorite places to go catch fish. Other wild rainbows and browns and what you'd call it smaller size range, but it's kind of the stuff I cut my teeth on. Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. A fishing rod or fly rod in your hand gets you to some cool places. I won't. I know we got to wrap things up, but I also just love to fish. Like I found myself randomly living in Venice Beach, California, a couple winters, which was a blast. I knew it would be temporary, but I used to go with a guy, and we'd go carp fishing in the LA River. Just wanted to go fishing,
Love it.
and yeah, and like there's so many fun places to go, and so many different species to target, and really cool places to go be able to guide for them.
Yeah, no, that's fantastic, man. And I think, I mean, just on a kind of towards the end of the show note, what a great sentiment is just loving to fish. Because that's what you're doing, like you said, right? Hey, we're just going fishing, and we're out here to go fishing with even clients. Go as far as to say we're going fishing with friends.
Yeah, that's it, man. And that's obviously we're gonna stay in touch, but I love what you're doing and just trying to, like I said, I guess I don't quite know the right way to say it, but just try to foster a very positive and welcoming vibe about, participating in these outdoor activities, and that there's it's for everybody, right?
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean that's one of the things I like to do here. Besides mentor people for fishing trips, I try to take out as many buddies hunting as I possibly can. Especially some of my friends that have moved into the area, they've never been hunting. I'm like, all right, man, like if this is what you want to do, let's get spun up and go. And I enjoy sharing that passion and watching them be
Yeah.
successful. It's a blast to share the outdoors with a lot of people. So um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Agreed,
that's
man. Let's keep doing it.
yeah, absolutely, man. Well, hey, thank you again so much, man. There's a lot, honestly, that I wish I could just spend hours getting more information out of you because there's, with the conservation side of things, I really enjoyed that class when you taught it.
Glad to hear
I
that.
nerd out on conservation. It's so important
Yeah.
for a million reasons, but maybe we'll get you back on again someday and can touch
I'd
on
love
some
to
of those
do
other
it, man.
things. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. Let's make a point of doing that. And then, if anybody out there listening wants some more information about our program, just reach out and we'll get you dialed in.
Yeah. Where can they find you?
My email is real easy. It's Corey, Corey, at sweetwatertravel.com. I also manage our Sweetwater Travel Guide School Facebook and Instagram page. Easy to find. Yeah, look forward to chat with anybody with any question.
Awesome. Yeah. Well, everybody, again, hit Corey up at Corey at sweetwatertravel.com. Telling you guys, you will not regret getting involved with the guide school if you're listening and you can either swing the funds or you can use your GI Bill benefit. Thank you so much, Corey. This is awesome. And right back at you. I love what you're doing. I told you when I was there, I'll tell you one more time on the air here that I just absolutely appreciate what you did for me and what you're doing for my fellow veterans out there, man. It is, you're making a world of difference in lives. So thank you.
Thank you. It's an awesome way for us to be able to give something back to you guys.
All right, folks. Well, I will probably be on social media in the next few days here. I've got some updates on our drift boat fundraiser. I will just tease it with we've procured a boat. I have a boat sitting in my driveway right now that we're going to be we're still doing the fundraiser because I need to do some stuff. So when you guys check out Pursuing Freedom Outdoors on Instagram, Facebook, and all that stuff, you guys will see. I'll get on there and explain the boat and what we're doing and why the fundraiser's not stopping. So, but we did get a boat and we are going to have that donated this spring to Protectors Peak. So that's going to be awesome. So if you're listening and you're thinking about donating, you can find the link in my Instagram bio. I've put it all over Facebook. It's just a GoFundMe account, or you can go to protectorspeak.com and just simply donate to the website and shoot me a message on any of those platforms, or Thomas at pursuingfreedomoutdoors.com, and just let me know that you made that donation. If you want to remain anonymous, just tell me that and how much you made. And I only need to know that if you did that on the website so that I can allocate those funds with the board and let them know, hey, we got some money specifically to the drift boat. So thanks everybody that's already supported. Thank you, Corey. And until next time, guys, go out there and pursue freedom in the outdoors. Thanks again. And if this resonates with you, I want to welcome you to the tribe and encourage you to share this podcast with your friends. Hit subscribe and follow us on Instagram at Pursuing Freedom Outdoors. And if you or someone you know has a great story about life or the wilderness, I want to share it. You can shoot me a message on Instagram or email me with all inquiries and questions at thomas@pursuingfreedomoutdoors.com. That's Thomas, Thomas, at pursuingfreedomoutdoors.com. Until next time, get out there, get after it, and pursue freedom in the outdoors. Before we get started, I want to thank our first partner, Response Ready Medical. Response Ready Medical, bringing our customers the best quality training and equipment for the worst case scenario. Response Ready Medical's vision is to be the leading provider of emergency preparedness solutions across the United States, empowering communities, organizations, and individuals to respond confidently and preserve life during critical moments. Offering same-day certification, all Response Ready Medical classes are instructed by nationally registered and state-licensed firefighter, paramedics, law enforcement officers, and hospital staff. Classes currently being offered by Response Ready Medical include CPR and AED, CPR, AED, and first aid, emergency trauma care, child and babysitting safety, CABS, backcountry medicine, and wilderness first aid. Your premium partner in emergency preparedness, Response Ready Medical.